Russell Dobler of Do Dissidence, who I like you too, Matt. That's why this hurts me, but deems me scum for not embracing his issue. I never said that. If you watched my segment, I went out of my way to talk about what a nice man he's always been when I've met him. As I mentioned with the first segment, I didn't even really want to do it. It was just to the point that I felt like we're doing a disservice to our audience. It felt like we're being dishonest to not cover it at that point with the Bari Weiss article, because if it were anybody else, we absolutely would cover it. You can't be talking about people's cowardice and then be like that.
That
Although,
was a
I mean,
huge story.
it's a huge story, and I mean, it wouldn't have been cowardice. It's friendship or loyalty or acquaintanceship. Matt was always very nice to us, and the whole, this whole kind of turn his reporting has taken. I guess I've been hoping, because here and there he would cover like Khalil or something. I was kind of hoping he would come back around, but it just seems like the Barry Weiss thing uh, closes off that possibility, although one can hope. So we would have left it there, but Matt called me out by name in an article, and they went on to address this whole controversy on their racket show. What's it called? America This Week.
America This
That
Week.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Keaton's going to cover more of that.
More
Although I
aptly
haven't.
titled America 5.5 years ago.
Yes. America 342 weeks ago.
America, March 2019.
Yes, yes. So this was Taibbi's response. He tweeted this out. In Gaza, does silence equal violence? The era of mandatory opinion once again rears its head, with the suggestion being essentially the wokies are coming. The wokies are insisting he have an opinion on something he doesn't have an opinion about.
They
So
had the same problem in 1942 in Germany. It was like this mandatory opinion that, you speak out against the camps and stuff,
yeah,
It was very
you
bothersome.
had to say something. You
Right.
couldn't just be like, "Look, they like shiny black boots."
Yeah, right. Exactly.
What does that have to do with me?
Yeah. It was very
I'm over
woke.
here covering the Tour de France.
Yeah.
What do you want from me?
Exactly. Frank Sinatra
Okay.
wouldn't play college campuses over there. You're too
Yeah,
woke.
yeah. He was notoriously woke.
Yeah.
That guy. So we're going to get into a few of the main points here. This wasn't laying laurels at the feet of Barry's Israel views. So he's saying the previous article that people were responding to was not glazing Barry Weiss. That it wasn't about that. It was just Schadenfreude before dingbats like Oliver Darcy, whose breathless coverage made it seem like CEO David Ellison kidnapped the very virtue of news by hiring Barry after vowing not to politicize CBS. This is the same Darcy who, in his CNN days, asked Comcast to deplatform Newsmax, OAN, and Fox. He also once retweeted, "Your Substack newsletter won't make you a millionaire." That seemed funny to me, but hundreds of Palestine advocates online disagreed, racing to the more obvious explanation: conspiracy. I was a Mossad toady, an apologist for genocidal lying scum, either caping for a future CBS job, you'll get that FP paycheck eventually, free press, or horny AF. One of the helpful qualities of the progressive left in America is its willingness not just to list jokes you may not make, but to write down exactly what you may say in their place. So the nation couldn't turn a profit if gifted the world's oil supply is out. If you're going to make this point, Matt, you should probably be funnier with your jokes. But Barry Weiss is an apologist for genocide, is correct. Don't ponder whose cock Stephen Colbert's mouth gets to holster now, but instead remember Barry Weiss is a Jewish supremacist agent for a foreign apartheid state, and so on. All right. So, I mean, all of it is pretty much like that. It's a lot of straw men. Most of the people who are really in the space are not wokies, not language police, Blumenthal, Aaron, Greenwald, us. certainly do not fit those categories, but Matt doesn't seem to actually want to take on the actual argument and the actual points. He wants to argue with a woke straw man that's insisting that he bend the knee to some kind of prescribed set of precepts. People don't see a conspiracy because of this particular article. If anything, it's I think giving the benefit of the doubt to assume that Matt is compromised. I don't think anybody really wants to believe that he chose to go this way. So let's take a look. He mentions there David Ellison, right? But then he goes on his show to talk about how he doesn't really know anything about that, which is a key point here. Like, you can't really get upset with people thinking you shouldn't write an article where you're lacking major points and don't seem to know what you're talking about. Get very offended that you're getting called out for that, and then admit you have no idea what you're talking about. So let's take a look at that.
But he came from the New York Times,
Okay, so this is funny if you watch Matt's reaction. Walter Kern, I guess, didn't get the memo that the whole premise that Matt wants to go with is that Bari built up such an incredibly successful Substack that CBS had to come begging to her to help save them. That's what's so funny about this. Walter doesn't seem to have gotten the memo. He seems to actually be on the page that we were on. That, what's the difference? You got an establishment toady backed by oligarchs. It's just a different set of oligarchs from the traditional legacy media oligarchs. And you'll see Matt doesn't really back him up on this and pretty quickly changes the subject.
From the most successful Substack, came from the Wall Street Journal before that, Columbia University. This is called the channel. This is called the system. This is called the man. This is called how it works in the United States.
So everybody's making hay about Ellison having avowed pro-Israel views, and his father having some kind of ties to the IDF. I'm not really sure what that is. I'm not sure that justifies Glenn calling Bari the Free Press state-run media,
Well, how could you possibly have that opinion if by your own admission you have no idea what you're talking about? You just admitted you don't know what you're talking about. So Matt, who has written extensively about journalism, about as extensively about the art and craft and ethics of journalism as anybody, why did you write an article about this without even knowing the basics of the CEO taking over the company? Like, this is just very basic stuff. It's not an expectation that you would know who cleans the copiers, right? It's kind of key to know who the guy taking over is and what his background is. So once again, as we did last time, I'm going to do some reporting for Matt. I'm going to show Matt how you do reporting again. Israel's biggest U.S. donor now owns CBS. Why, quote, while Oracle has signed multiple lucrative contracts with the Israeli National Security State, Ellison himself has personally bankrolled the Israeli Defense Forces, giving tens of millions of dollars to the Friends of the IDF, an organization that purchases equipment for the Israeli military. This included a $16.6 million pledge, the largest single donation the group has received, to build a new training facility for soldiers defending what he called our home. Our home. As Ellison explained, in my mind, there is no greater honor than supporting some of the bravest people in the world, and I thank Friends of the IDF for allowing us to celebrate and support these soldiers year after year. In my mind, there is no greater honor than supporting some of the bravest people in the world, and I thank we should do all we can to show these heroic soldiers that they are not alone. Safar Katz, the company's Israeli-American CEO, bluntly explained, "We are not flexible regarding our mission, and our commitment to Israel is second to none," she said, adding, "This is a free world, and I love my employees. And if they don't agree with our mission to support the state of Israel, then maybe we aren't the right company for them. Larry and I are publicly committed to Israel and devote personal time to the country, and no one should be surprised by that. Okay, so if you know that context, that he described Israel as his home, and then you find out that he's taken over CBS and is buying the Free Press, whose editor-in-chief, whose founder is notoriously fanatically Zionist, and putting her in charge of editorial content. There's no justification there for calling the Free Press state press. I mean, you've run around for years calling CNN that. You don't think there's at least as much justification for calling CBS under that CEO that, or the Free Press that? You would probably know that if you bothered to do basic research before you wrote the article. Nobody made Matt write that article. Nobody was sitting around saying, what does Matt Taibbi think about this? You chose to wade into something that you don't know anything about by choice. Now you're claiming that you don't want to cover Israel. Well, this is why you can't do that and remain a relevant journalist. You want to continue to litigate Twitter files and Russiagate and whatever the fuck you did 3 or 4 years ago, and appeal to the dwindling audience that's going to continue to pay you for that. That's fine. If you want to cover something like Bari Weiss, you cannot use the cop-out, I don't know about Israel. If you don't know about it, then don't talk about Bari Weiss. Nobody
Right,
would
of
have,
course.
nobody was coming for you. People had pretty much, by this time, become resigned to whatever's going on with you. You're just not in the game anymore, right? And then you put yourself in the game by writing this. So, going back to the original article, so he's saying this was just making a little joke. He wasn't endorsing Bari Weiss. Well, you be the judge. She understood in a way her spineless, now complaining former colleagues from the mainstream press world never did, that in order to survive and retain her audience, she would need to take risks and bet on herself. After building a broad roster at the Free Press, she's taking $200 million offer to save desperate, near extinct CBS News. Naturally, every entitled fat keistered slob clogging the rolls of non-functional news organizations is crying she doesn't deserve it. How many of these plaintive mannequins denouncing her grift would have the guts to leave one of the cushiest jobs in print media and bet on themselves in the open market? 0.0%, as in not one. Now, if these are the jokes, I got to tell you, maybe you should look into a different line of work. I don't think you have a future as a nightclub comic if this is your idea of a funny article about the hypocrisies of the media, or if you consider that an article where you're not endorsing Bari Weiss. Now, as we got into in our other segment, which I guess we'll link in the comments, the original segment we did, the core premise that the Free Press is getting $100 to $200 million on the strength of the powerhouse organization, indie media organization that Bari Weiss built is bullshit. And Matt knows that's bullshit. At one point, he actually mentions Mark Andreessen as one of the investors, and you'll see right at the top of this video clip, he talks about the $15 million that they got in seed money, but he's completely incurious about what they got that money for, about why that money was given to what is essentially a blog.
That CBS and its new CEO, David Ellison, is he a Paramount CEO or doesn't matter. But apparently he's going to
Doesn't
offer.
matter.
Doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter?
Buy
Yeah.
the Free Press.
That's almost like journalism is the art of explaining those things to people. This is, digging into the second article, it's worse than the first. It's the opposite of journalism. You come away more ignorant than you were when you started. Right. The Daily Wire has more news value than Racket does at this point, because Daily Wire would not write an article about Bari Weiss without talking about Israel. They would defend it. So then, as a reader, you read that. If you don't agree with it, at least you got the information. Oh, hang on. They're tied to Israel. Let me look into that. And you could look at it in other sources. To read what Matt wrote, you wouldn't know that was going on.
Right.
You wouldn't. It's the opposite of journalism. It's not informing. It's misleading. It's misleading. You want to argue that's not the case? Well, maybe you should find out who the fuck David Ellison is. Maybe you should find out who Larry Ellison is. And if you don't want to do that, don't write the article. Don't write the article. What are you writing about something that you admit you know nothing about for?
Right. It's like writing a review of like Leni Riefenstahl's filmography. Yeah, and I heard she had something to do with Hitler, whatever. It's not
I
important.
heard about it.
Yeah, I don't know
I heard
much
something about that.
Yeah, exactly.
And
The Free Press, which is essentially a Substack.
it's
I
a
mean,
Substack, that was started with $15 million in seed capital, which seems like a lot of money to me because you don't really need money to do a Substack, but whatever.
Whatever. Whatever.
Yeah,
He starts actually going down a road that might be fruitful to his readers, but whatever.
You do need it if you're going to hire people, I guess.
that success was not our doing. That success that attracted the backing of these investors was the doing of the readers and the viewers of the Free Press. And I don't know that there is another, quote, alternative or semi-alternative news source that succeeded that, that astonishingly, that notably.
Only one way you can get like mind-numbingly barking rich in news media, and that is to sell a property, a small property, to a bigger property, right? And she did it, and it's not surprising. That's all I'm saying.
Wow. Okay, so there, Walter going on there about what a successful organization is. We'll briefly touch on that. We got into it in more detail on Sunday. The idea that this is a great story because hey, she got barking rich and without at all interrogating why, but kind of intimating it. Well, you don't need that money to run a Substack. And as I said, he mentions Andreessen at one point in the video. So maybe as a journalist, you should look into who Andreessen is and why he would have invested in the Free Press. That would be a job of a journalist, not to glaze Bari Weiss and celebrate that she got barking rich. And gosh, I just don't have the business sense that Bari Weiss has. I mean, really, you didn't pedal your ass as well as Bari Weiss did. Synapse debacle cost users their life savings. Again, you can take a look at the article segment from Sunday if you want more on that. He makes his money robbing people of their life savings with dodgy fintech products. David Sachs, now the White House AI and crypto czar, part of the PayPal mafia, advisor to Elon Musk, reputedly one of the people who strongly urged him to buy X, a money-losing operation. Why would he do that except for control of media, control of the conversation? Exactly the kind of thing that Matt has spent a lot of his career talking about when it's corporate media. For some reason, he doesn't want to talk about it here. And then you have Sir Paul Marshall, the evangelical Christian who belongs to what, in my opinion, it sounds like a very creepy parish of the Church of England that's populated by very rich people like Russell Brand. And he's been on a spree buying up media outlets. Okay, well, it's pretty clear why these guys would give money to Bari Weiss. And to talk about this without getting into that, it's worse than bad journalism. It's misinforming your audience, not telling them this. But he kind of explains, maybe you be the judge, why this doesn't bother him. Maybe he's perfectly aware of it, but it doesn't bother him.
people who own media, as you say, they have opinions. This is like I was asked by Freddie Sayers at Unheard last week, who was upset about Elon and Elon's influence in England, and people who own Twitter, who own internet platforms, they have a point of view, and Elon is expressing his. What's where there's a line that is more upsetting for me is when government controls that.
But Matt, I thought you were his patsy too. Now here you are having to describe pointillistically your feelings about Bari Weiss. Wasn't it just yesterday that you were having to, vouch for your independence from Elon Musk, who, whose vile text messages to you I have seen and you have put on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, and who's sitting on my account such that there's a reason why that's another reason why I'm not going to be running CBS.
And before that,
there's almost like in a psychotherapy workshop, if they made you do a play showing the traits of borderline personality disorder. This is what yes, you're victims. You're victims. Everybody's falsely accusing you. I don't even know where Kern was going with that. But yeah, hey, he maybe is not disturbed by all these oligarchs with money in the free press, because according to what he's saying here, he doesn't mind that Elon has an editorial point of view and juices the algorithm on X accordingly. Well, at that point, Matt, should we just light your entire body of work on fire? Because that's essentially the issue you've had with corporate media, hasn't it? Which you've written so incisively about, that there's big money that affects editorial decisions. Those are private companies. Those are not government companies. What do you think? This government, are you saying what bothers you is if the government, a la Twitter Files, is in bed with the private organization? You think this fucking crew is not in bed with that crew? With the David Sachs works in the White House. He's one of the investors in the free press. So even if what you're arguing is you just don't like where the two intersect, well, they clearly intersect in this case. So what you're arguing is this should go in the garbage, because everything you're complaining about here applies to this deal that you seem to think is the best thing since sliced bread. Anything, Keaton, before I go on?
No, go ahead.
Okay. The core premise, as we showed the other night, I will briefly touch on. Glenn says it concisely. I'll just read what he said about it. Most of the videos of the free press, including Bari's podcast, barely break 10,000 views on YouTube. On a scale of 1 to 10 for online impact, this might be a 3. Whatever the 200 million is for, it's not for the real value of her blog, but for Bari's role in spouting Israel propaganda. Now, Matt seems to take exception to that. He called out Glenn specifically, saying it's unfair to call it state media. Okay, so make the case. Make the case. Because on the facts, which you do not present to your audience in what I would consider a real violation of the contract you have with the people giving you money to do the best reporting you can with the resources available to you. This didn't take a lot. We don't have a staff. Just Google. Just a little Googling. Wasn't hard to find that they have no views. They have no views. Look at this. They have no views. This is their YouTube. This is their articles. Hardly any comments. Hardly any likes. So this core premise that she built up this great media outlet and CBS wants her to come in and save them with her indie perspective is total bullshit. This is clearly a story about oligarchs largely from Silicon Valley, but not exclusively, partly from the PayPal mafia network, buying up indie media outlets and getting one of their own into the Death Star of legacy media. Now, if you wanted to write an article talking about how ironic that is, as you actually did with Donald Trump, talking about using that metaphor. That's where I'm getting it from, as he figured out the vulnerability in the Death Star of the American press that they couldn't help but give him attention, right? If you wanted to write an article like, well, in the end, Bari Weiss negotiated this landscape of oligarchs trying to control the media and worked her way right back into legacy media, that's valid. That's valid. That's completely in keeping with the work Matt has always done, but that's not the article he actually wrote. He wrote an article that is completely misinforming his audience and that does not discuss any of those factors and misleads them into thinking the free press is successful on its merits, which it is not, as you can clearly see. Going on. Israel supporters will argue with you. They will get defensive on days like today. I don't know what it was about yesterday. And lecture you about the history leading up to their decision. American advocates for Palestine don't bother arguing. Since they don't admit the possibility of honest disagreement, they move straight to the corrupt reasons you must have for failing to already embrace their view. Payoffs, blackmail, cowardice, or submission to the great Jewish conspiracy. That once forbidden last idea they suggest with the giddiness of teenagers who have just discovered oral sex. Wow, that's quite a turn of phrase, Matt. Is the next line going to be they should be shot into space? So Max Blumenthal responded to this. Hi, Matt. You just wrote Israel supporters will argue with you. They will get defensive on days like today and lecture you about the history leading up to their decision. American advocates for Palestine don't bother arguing. Would you like to argue this point and others you've made about the Israel-Palestine debate live at the Gray Zone? Maybe Aaron will join too. This is part of what's really so off-putting about this entire victim routine. Do you know how many people, I'm sure, known and unknown, have invited Matt to come debate this? Pete Hagar, we know, invited him. We invited him, which to be fair is still open. He didn't completely decline it. So we will see. I will be surprised. And there was no response to Matt. Again, to be fair, to Max rather. To be fair, we don't know. Maybe they're negotiating behind the scenes. There is quite a wealth of people who would be happy to go back and forth with Matt on this, to present this, being somebody who we know has repeatedly either declined appearances where he was asked to talk about this or made it a condition of an appearance that this would not be raised. To come out and talk about, no, they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, we don't want to argue, right?
That's pretty sleazy. That's pretty sleazy. As somebody who has gone so far out of their way to avoid having that conversation. Anything before I go on?
Well, no, I mean, I think you have it. When it came up on, Sabby, he was reluctant to address it. And yeah, I mean, he told us off the record he was reluctant to address it. So, if there's anyone who's not up for a conversation, it's certainly not the pro-Palestine side. But again,
very happy to debate that.
This is all just a way to conflate, which is very ironic and very sleazy, I must say, the pro-Palestine movement with the woke movement. Which is funny because your whole article, which you wrote just after October 7th, was how the fact that a lot of these students who were raised, or not raised, but who were, if you want to say indoctrinated, fine, into this woke discourse at these universities, they ran into this very sort of tense conflict with the people who taught them that, because along came a scenario where anti-colonial theory actually applied.
Came into practice,
and
yes.
The professors who taught the students about such theory didn't want them applying that knowledge to this event. That was the whole point of your article.
Right.
He obviously liked that article enough to share that article, which we were very grateful for at the time and still are. I think about a third of our Substack subscribers, not paid, but a third of our mailing list came from that article because he shared it. He obviously liked that enough and saw that as a good point that, hey, you know what?
Right.
This is a situation where wokeness actually applies to the real world. And all of a sudden, the people who taught the kids to be woke are not so woke. And now he's trying to conflate the sort of trivialness of the woke movement with the pro-Palestine movement, which I don't think is a connection he even sees, really.
Yeah, it's all the intellectual dark web, John McWhorter bullshit. It's all about grievance, and increasingly it just looks like the grievance of old men, especially when you watch that freaking show. So here's where it gets to yours truly. Russell Dobler of Do Dissidence, who I like you too, Matt. That's why this hurts me, but deems me scum for not embracing his issue. I never said that. If you watched my segment, I went out of my way to talk about what a nice man he's always been when I've met him. Put it this way after the Bari column. This really breaks my heart. Matt is officially into his Vegas Lounge Act years. I don't get it. Do they have pictures of him next to a dead hooker in St. Petersburg? The irony is, I'd bet Russell initially became a fan of mine because I think for myself and don't regurgitate bromides about threats to the region or assault camps or the existential threat to democracy or whatever the official propaganda line of the day was at the time. Now, though, it breaks his heart that I'm not speaking the magic words, genocide, Zionist, settler colonialism, etc. I don't talk about hang gliding terrorists or hostages either, but no matter. Left activist cliches are better than Pentagon versions, so failure to salute them makes me a genocide apologist with a dead hooker on my conscience. Well, okay, we'll address some of this. Nobody is accusing you of not using the right words or not showing obeisance to popular ideas or sloganeering. I mean, a lot of what you just listed there, we don't really use ourselves, probably because being understanding that some portions of the social justice left can be counterproductive with that kind of sloganeering. We're not really inclined to it. We're always trying to kind of reach out to people who might be put off by that. I would say that's a pretty good description of our audience. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Nick Fuentes are calling this a genocide.
Right.
And we've and many in the pro-Palestine space, even though our politics are far to their left on 99 out of 100 things, we don't bite their hand when they say, we don't say, get out of our movement. You don't say the right words. No, not at all.
Certainly not. Certainly not.
No.
Look, Matt wants to make this a litigation of the wokies because it's all he can do, really. Right. He's put himself in a box where he can't address what is arguably the most animating issue of the historical moment, and one that touches on pretty much anything that you're going to cover, which is why he just wants to keep covering stories from 3 and 4 years ago where he can go into a little safe space and not have to deal with this issue. As we will see, the basic idea that he never covered it or doesn't understand it is just a lie. And the reason that people think you're compromised is because you're lying about never having covered it. You're lying about not knowing enough about it. So at that point, people have to wonder, why are you lying about that? And if anything, the idea that you're compromised is better than arguing you just decided to be irrelevant. You just decided to be this way. You just got wet-brained enough that you can't actually talk about what's going on around you. As far as I know, you don't have Hunter Thompson's problems with those things. Some people have said that. Doesn't seem that way to me. I've never seen that. But to explain, to answer, to respond why you can't ignore this, well, here's Thomas Massey in an interview with Tucker Carlson explaining in part why you can't be covering that without getting into this issue.
but me has an AIPAC person.
What's that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
That's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them. And they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them.
That's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, I'll talk to my AIPAC person. And it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country? It doesn't benefit the congressman for people to know that, so they're not going to tell you that.
So unless you want to limit yourself to small town meetings where they're voting on a new stop sign, yeah, you really can't be a relevant observer of the domestic scene and refuse to talk about Israel. You just can't. Nobody is saying that you've got to be Max Blumenthal or Aaron Mate or Norman Finkelstein. We're not. We're not. But the first thing I did after October 7th was read a history of the Middle East. I started from there, and I continued, and I learned enough that I feel comfortable talking about the subject. Not in the way that Max might. I don't have that level of expertise. I don't claim to. But this is the nature of journalism, right? It's the first draft of history. You're always cramming for the test. That's the gig, as I'm sure Matt knows better than I do. You want to see why you have to cover Israel? Look at what this has done to your work. Look what this has done to your site. Look at this. We've got ICE raids. You've got Supreme Court rulings about habeas corpus exploding this week. What the fuck are you covering? Gender from fucking 3-4 years ago? We covered that. We don't cover it much now because it's kind of done. Like, I'm not saying don't touch on it every now and then. Really? Like with all of, or if it were even in the mix with these other subjects. Really? Transhumanism, the ersatz religion. Yeah, no, that's really relevant right now. Interestingly, he mentions Unheard, which belongs to Sir Marshall. They're one of the investors in the Free Press, whose son is Winston Marshall, another one of the kind of intellectual dark web figures pushing exactly the same talking points. Here's Matt doing an interview with what's his name? Frankie Sayers from Unheard. Is Europe or Donald Trump's America a bigger threat to free speech? Now, look, I was not going to go and subject myself to that interview. I am betting you guys don't talk about the suppression of pro-Palestine voices or the journalists who have been arrested in England. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know. I'd be surprised if I am. This, I actually had the time to look at the article. I know you didn't get into any of that. Everyone this week, it's very funny. It's very funny. People on the anti-woke grift train, they all this week were very excited to have something to report. The UK earned status as a censorship state. The arrest of Graham Linehan for his tweets is one of many examples. Okay, all right. So you want to cover that? Fine. This happened a few days later. Are you going to cover this? I would say this is more significant than they rousted a comedian. He's not even charged. They rousted a comedian at the airport. It's fucked up. I'd say this is more fucked up, wouldn't you? Breaking. 857 total arrested for sign holding yesterday. You want to talk about censorship? I was able to say the name of that comedian in this segment, right? I can't say the name of the organization that they were protesting in part on behalf of because we could lose our channel for it. Now that seems like censorship. That seems like something you might want to cover. You would argue that your beat is censorship, right? You covered the subject. You covered the subject of censorship in the UK. So it's within your beat, right? Do you really think a comedian getting rousted at the airport is more important than this? I eagerly await Matt's coverage of this subject. Among the 857 arrestees were vicars and priests, war veterans and descendants of Holocaust survivors, retired teachers, and healthcare workers. Mike Higgins, a blind and disabled activist, was arrested for the second time under the Lift the Ban campaign after 10 hours of protest in Parliament Square, joining 800 others detained for opposing UK complicity in Israel's genocide. As police took him away, the crowd cheered while he defiantly raised his sign.
And
we
notice,
we have no other choice than to protest, Mike said. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Notice these tweets are not even mentioning the group name, because the group name, because of their proscription or whatever the fuck they call it in the UK, they're banned on X. They're basically banned on YouTube. They have a channel, but their videos are not disseminated. Essentially a private channel. So yeah, you can't even talk about this shit. You can't even talk about this. Censorship is a major beat of yours. You don't have to be an expert on the conflict to be against censorship, do you?
Right. So maybe you should get on that instead of obsessing on comedians who got rousted at the airport. I mean, yeah, that's messed up. That shouldn't happen. Don't you think this is the bigger story? If you're going to cover UK censorship, why would you not cover this? And that is why it's not people are conspiracy theorists. People don't understand why you suck this much now. That is what it is. And to attribute it to conspiracy, that's the kindest explanation. That's the kindest explanation for why you want to talk about the comedian, but you don't want to talk about over 800 protesters being arrested. Or how about this? Journalist Sarah Wilkinson has apparently been rearrested by British counterterrorism police. Starmer's war on democracy continues apace. Have you written about this? I must have missed it. I'm a subscriber. I must have missed it if you did. I used to look forward to Matt's articles dropping in my inbox. Now I dread it. I dread it because I'm like, oh man, what completely off base Russiagate article am I going to get now on the day that like a major Epstein story broke? Police send file on British independent journalist Richard Medhurst to Crown Prosecution Service. How about that? How about that? You're a journalist, right? You're very dedicated to civil liberties, freedom of speech. Have you written a single article about this? Single article. You don't even have to agree with his views on Palestine to agree with his right to express them, right? How about this? You're talking about Europe censorship. Switzerland has arrested Palestinian American journalist Ali Abu Nima. Did you write about that? I don't remember. I didn't see it. If you did, how about this? Israel's war on Gaza, deadliest conflict for journalists, says report. More journalists killed in Gaza than in both world wars, Vietnam, Yugoslavia, and Afghanistan combined, says Costs of War Project. This is a pretty recent article. The number's probably gone up since it's been written, honestly. It's like a couple weeks ago. At least 278 journalists and media workers, mostly Palestinians, have been killed in Israel's war on Gaza since October 7th, 2023. 273 Palestinians. You don't feel that's your beat? That's not your beat? You have to go there? You're pulling the Douglas Murray argument. You haven't been? You haven't been? We haven't been either. We cover it. So moving on. I got a call to do an appearance with a friend of Brianna's, Sabrina Sabi Sab Salvati, with whom I'd always gotten along. It was going fine until we hit this question. The Pentagon just issued a statement saying they don't consider what's happening in Gaza a genocide. I strongly disagree. How do you feel about what's happening there? It was once considered a virtue in journalism to decline to answer a question if you don't know what you're talking about. I explained to her that Gaza wasn't a subject that I had ever covered, and that as a reporter, you get in trouble when you speak outside your area of expertise. I was clearly talking about getting in trouble factually, but we live in a conspiratorial age. Get in trouble with who? She said. Zionists? This was nuts. I work for myself. My income is from individual subscribers sending a few dollars a month. See, Matt's never heard of audience capture. He doesn't know what that is. He doesn't know what kinds of other pressures could be brought to bear on you professionally, socially. The man who had the IRS come to his house doesn't understand what she's talking about. Do Zionists have the power or inclination to stop all those little transactions? I just don't think I'm obligated to talk about things I haven't covered, I said, trying to be polite. Quote, I think I disagree with that, Matt, she said. She disagreed that I prefer to only speak when I know what I'm talking about. Genocide is a serious, serious issue. She was telling me the answer to her question. Next, she said Glenn Greenwald told her nobody is an expert, and Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate get a lot of pushback, and people smear them all the time for speaking about Israel. All your friends have already given the right answer. Why won't you? Then I don't think you have to be afraid of the pushback. Okay. All right. So Matt is arguing here that unless you're an expert in something, you can't cover it. You can't cover it. All right. So what's Matt's background? Matt has a BA from Bard College, according to this. Now, admittedly, I did a lot of it's kind of sketchy what his major is. It doesn't seem like that's all that apparent, but he has a BA, right? He studied Russian literature at Leningrad State University. I think we can safely say that Matt, when he started writing these books, was not an expert on police brutality or Eric Garner, right? And yet he wrote a book on those subjects. He did what journalists are supposed to do. He did research so he could inform his readers about it. That's by definition what you do. Was he an expert on drug dealing when he wrote about the business of drug dealing? Griftopia, was he an expert on Wall Street and high finance when he dug into that subject and what the circumstances were surrounding the 2008 crash? That's a very complicated subject, which he addressed very well and very effectively. So his basic premise that if you're not an expert in a subject, you can't address it, you can't write about it, you can't learn about it. It's absurd on the face of it for not only a journalist, but a journalist at Matt's level of the game, born into a family of journalism, to say something so ridiculous. If you don't already know about it, you can't learn. You've had a lot of time to learn about it. But of course, this is total bullshit because Matt knows very well about it, or at least he did 23 fucking years ago when he wrote this article that call out to Zaid Jilani for finding this. You used to write about Palestine, including criticizing media ignorance of the Palestinians. Wonder what changed. This was 23 years ago. And you know what? For those of you who love Matt's old writing, this is gonna bring you back, man. This is the Matt Taibbi we all love, in which he makes it very clear he knows exactly what's going on in Israel, and he's known for a very long time. So this was addressing, those of you who are old enough might remember, CNN put out a video showing people celebrating 9/11, showing Arabs celebrating 9/11. So this is titled Far Gone in 30 Seconds, because that was the length of the clip. CNN sentences Palestine to death. In general, American coverage of Islam tends to focus on 2 or 3 key themes that are offered as explanation for Arab hostility to America. The first is the poverty of Islamic countries. Muslims are inevitably portrayed as murderously envious of American affluence. The envy is almost always blind and irrational. To quote the New York Times analysis from September 16th, remember this is 2002, Muslim extremists profess a hatred for the values cherished in the West as freedom, tolerance, prosperity, religious pluralism, and universal suffrage. The second is religious fanaticism as expressed in the endless America seen as great Satan pieces. Muslims do not fear death because they believe in an afterlife. Muslims are all inspired to jihad by commandment from above. Muslims are willing to kill anyone, guilty or innocent, to recapture the homelands and rid the world of infidel, i.e., American values. The third theme is anti-Semitism. Muslims are shown throwing rocks at Israeli soldiers for no apparent reason. the rock throwing, I'm not going to say that in case we get in trouble with YouTube, photo was one of the great cliches of 20th century journalism. The reason they were throwing rocks, we were always told, is that they're crazed anti-Semites. And we know who else was an anti-Semite. That's a very Matt flourish. But Palestinians have a simple reason to hate Americans. Americans are supporting the occupation of their country by Israel. Israeli armed forces, the same people who are bulldozing neighborhoods and shooting into crowds, use American weapons, even American missiles. The United States is basically a colonial aggressor to most Palestinians, some 360,000 of which are living as refugees in Lebanon.
It was woke.
But
back
all
then.
of, huh?
It was woke
very,
back then.
It was very woke. It was very woke. Well, I hear he used to go in the women's bathroom back then. But all of this got left out, making the situation much worse than it ever was. This is how he closes it out. Probably no single film clip in recent history has had as much of an impact as the Palestine clip. Summing it up one way was Ehud Sprinzak, an Israeli expert on terrorism who was quoted in Reuters referring to the clip. Quote, "From the perspective of Jews, it is the most important public relations act ever committed in our favor," unquote. Put it another way, in the 48 hours after the clip ran, Israelis shot and killed 13 Palestinians in the Jenin area of the West Bank. 30 seconds was all that took. Forget about anyone ever being reasonable when this is the way our leading journalists work. So, Matt, when you say you don't know enough to talk about this, you're straight up lying. You are straight up lying. You understand the situation very well. Very well. You describe very accurately why people in that part of the world have such anger about what's been done to them. You accurately describe what America is doing to prop up Israel and what Israel does with the money and weapons we send them. You indict the media for putting forth, rightly so, a very facile, cliched vision of that part of the world that doesn't get into these nuances. You connect the way that Israeli propaganda or Hasbara is used and deployed in places like CNN in ways that get the people there killed. That's the greatest irony of this. You're propping up and glazing Bari Weiss, and don't deny it. Okay, we've read that article. Don't deny that you were giving Bari Weiss a nice foot rub there and talking about her like this brilliant entrepreneur without ever talking about Israel. You're propping up exactly one of the worst of the kinds of propagandists that you called out in that article. That you're talking about somebody who literally is widely believed to have gotten a Palestinian poet killed by putting a target on his back for making a joke, for making some gallows humor. So when Sabby or when I say, well, it looks like Matt is compromised, I don't know that you want to argue otherwise, because that's the nicest explanation there could be. You notice we're not saying like he's bought, he saw. We got a lot of comments of people saying that. I hate to think that. I don't know. I don't know. I stick by what I said. It doesn't make sense. It's not natural. Matt was too good at the job at one time to have just gone this way naturally. I believe there's some kind of pressure. Then again, man, I mean, looking at going so far as to write this defensive, completely missing and going around the point fucking article and doing whatever that was with Walter yesterday, I don't know, man. Maybe he does mean it. Maybe he's on crack. I don't fucking know. I know that as a journalist, Matt, your work has become the opposite of journalism. You are misinforming and misdirecting people, which is your prerogative, and people can pay for that kind of work if they want. It's a free marketplace, but you cannot blame people for wondering when you got somebody who was one of the most important independent-minded journalists in the space, what the fuck happened to that guy? It's not because people are woke. It's not because people hate you. It's because, you know what they say? The opposite of love is indifference. After this, I think this is the last attention you'll get from that space, which is maybe what you want. After this, I don't think anybody's going to be paying any attention. Nobody was paying attention before. People only paid attention because you weighed in on this thing that was so tied to Israel that it was just absurd that you would cover it without talking about that. So you drew attention, and it surprised people. It surprised people because basically you've been staying in this little hole where you could just replay your greatest hits from 2021. The fact that you stepped into something in the current era, well, this demonstrates, this is the answer to your question. This is why you have to cover Israel, because look what happened when you tried to cover that without talking about it. So if you're not compromised, what can I tell you, man? Poltergeist, come back into the light. Go into the light, man. Come back into the light. I would love to see some of the kind of reporting that we just showed from Matt Taibbi in 2002, man. You're a great writer then. I would love to see that. But going around and saying this is because people are woke or they have it in for you, it's quite the opposite, man. It's quite the opposite. It's because a lot of people who really loved your work just don't recognize what you've become.
Please clap.